welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. In this video, I'm going to teach you the kettlebell swings. This is a huge milestone. This is a very, very important video. I'm going to show you, I'm going to break this up into 3 sections. How to, that's the first section. The second section is going to be common mistakes. And the third section, which you may want to do when you get a little bit of practice and reps under your belt, are progressions and other variations of the kettlebell swing that you can start to practice once you've gotten the two-handed swing down. That's what we're going to focus on in the first section, is just the two-handed kettlebell swing. Please understand the scope of this video too, which is we're picking up in this video where we left off in the level 2 kettlebell fundamentals lesson, deadlift, kettlebell deadlift. So we're picking up where that lesson left off, which is to say that the two-hand kettlebell swing and all of the swings that we're going to learn are a progression of the deadlift. I am not teaching you this today as though you've never done a single deadlift in your life. I'm teaching you this today as though you've done the work to get to this lesson and you've practiced your deadlift to the point where you're highly competent and you can repeat rep after rep with excellent form and excellent technique. Not super worried about how heavy you're going or anything like that, but we really want to make sure that you're able to do that with excellent technique before we think about moving into the kettlebell swing, okay? I'm not going to solve deadlift problems in this video. We're solving kettlebell swing problems in this video. Got it? That's going to save a lot of time. With that in mind, I would say that the primary difference, the thing that you're going to have to really focus on as we start to progress, is the tempo and the timing of the swing compared to the deadlift. Keep in mind that the deadlift is a slow strength phase exercise, 3 to 5 seconds per rep. With the kettlebell swing, we're talking about 1.5 seconds for a full rep. So it's half, if not even faster than that, half as long, twice as fast, or faster than the deadlift. That's what the swing is. So our nervous system is coordinating the same amount of effort in a much shorter period of time with a swing than it was doing it with a deadlift. That's one of the reasons it's so important that we've got that deadlift perfected before we begin. Because the tempo of the swing is so much greater, so much faster, it also makes timing sometimes an issue in your practice of the skill and your development and mastery of the technique. So that is going to be something that we will address as we get to the second section in this video, which is common mistakes. So pay attention. We really want to, because of the tempo, we really need to nail the timing. Got it? Okay, so for this video, feel free to play along with me. Grab 3, 4, 5 kettlebells. We want to have something very, very light to play around with. Move up in weight when that starts to feel a little bit too light, and listen to our body every single step of the way. But if you want to swing some kettlebells with me today, feel free to grab some light kettlebells and we will practice together, and we will make sure that you understand exactly what this movement should look and feel like before you begin. Grab your kettlebells, let's get started. The first part of this video is how to kettlebell swing. Now, fortunately, because we've already done the homework and learning how to do our deadlifts, this actually is going to be a relatively short section. This is going to go by pretty quickly because we're just talking about the difference between the deadlift and the swing, okay? Both of these patterns are hip hinge. If I'm deadlifting, the hips go back, forward lean, neutral spine, beautiful alignment between your ankles, your knees, and your hips, and your feet stay flat into the ground. So both of these movements are a hip hinge. Incidentally, I would say that a deadlift, depending upon how high the object is that you're lifting, tends to be a little bit deeper range of motion in that hip hinge than a kettlebell swing, which actually doesn't take you all that deep into the hinge. So that would be one thing to note that would be a difference. Also, one of the main differences would be the trajectory or the path of the kettlebell. So with a deadlift, it's up and down, and as a result of that, you begin the kettlebell in the dead position, which is directly underneath your plumb line of your body, and now you can just simply move it straight up and down, keeping it as close to that line as possible, where it's going to feel as light as possible. With a kettlebell swing, we're not moving the bell up and down anymore. We're moving it back to front. Okay, so really pay attention to this. And as we get into the next section, mistakes, we're really going to learn how to polish this and learn how to get this correct. But this is a back to front movement that is powered through your hips. Okay, when we say hips, really we're talking about glutes, and the hamstrings are also helping out. So it's a drive forward from hip flexion to hip extension that powers the bell out front. Okay, one thing that you'll notice is as you swing, there's a pop, there's a little hip snap to the top. It's not soft. Generally, you want to try to get a little pop to the top of that position. Coupled with that pop, that hip snap, with that bell coming out front, is a lot of tension in the core. And you might notice it in the pelvic floor and in the deep core stabilizers. And this is going to be more true the heavier the weight you're swinging, proportionate to your strength. But you'll also probably feel it in the front of your body, in the abs especially, because what can tend to happen is as you drive the hips forward, if you're not paying attention to the core, then what happens is a lot of times the shoulders kind of drop back and you end up here. Now my shoulders are behind my hips. That's not desirable. You want to be at the top position, ankle, shoulder, hip in alignment like that, okay? Now let me go back to the deviation. If I'm leaning or arching my back at the top of the swing, my abdomen is very lengthened out. So as you drive the hips forward, give a little squeeze here, like you're getting, almost like you're bracing for a punch at the top of that swing. And what we're not trying to do is crunch, okay? We don't want to end up with the abdomen so flexed that it actually puts us into flexion, but we want to have the engagement in the abdomen that's necessary to keep us neutral and prevent us from arching our back like this, which can happen, okay? So the top of the swing, you've got the glutes and hamstrings kind of lock out, and then at the same moment, you kind of brace for a punch and exhale, okay? So when we think about the kettlebell swing on this level, there's really two exercises that we're combining in a way. One would be, of course, the deadlift. The other one would be a push-up or a plank position. And you can practice the top of your kettlebell swing simply by coming down to this plank position like this. And you're holding your body in a very straight line, head in alignment with your spine. And what you're also doing when you hit the deck and you come into that position is that you're learning and reinforcing that closing of the shoulder through lat engagement, pulling the tricep and lat together and connecting. So when you get down there like that, you feel that. And of course, we might have learned that here in the deadlift too, that you're packing your shoulders. And that's also going to be extremely important when you swing the kettlebell. Packing those shoulders so that when you come to the top, the shoulders aren't elevating and they're not coming out front. Okay, they're staying nice, and the shoulder blades are staying nice and adducted, close to your body, close to your spine at the top of the swing. Okay, so those are some really good positions that you can learn. So when I go to swing a kettlebell, I do not want the bell underneath me as I did with a deadlift. I want it out front. Before I do my kettlebell swing, just like I did with my deadlift, I'm going to do my safety check, okay? The safety check, when you get good at it, it happens in the blink of an eye. But at first, it might take you a moment to really get it, right? But hopefully, by now, you've got it because you've done plenty of deadlifts. But again, the safety check, just like in the deadlift, is am I sitting back in my hips? Is my posture correct in general? Are my feet flat into the ground? Do I have good alignment between my ankles, knees, and hips? Is my spine, is my back flat, head in alignment with my spine, or my shoulders packed. Inhale, brace the core, and you want to do all of those things right there. Okay? So it happens as a sort of a felt experience. Boom, locking in, and then you begin once you've done that instantaneous safety check. If you're down in the safety check and it doesn't feel right, something's out of alignment, and you try to adjust, and you kind of get it, but you've been down here for a few seconds, sometimes it's best to walk away and come back and do it again. If you get stuck down here too static for too long, it gets hard to explode out of that position, okay? So come down, pack, shoulders, everything, safety check real fast, got it. Now from here, you're gonna swing that bell back behind you and then out front, okay? So I'm gonna demonstrate a few kettlebell swings, show you this exercise. It's a super lightweight, which makes it easy for me to talk to you while I do it. And then we're gonna get into common mistakes, because the common mistakes has a lot of carryover with the how-to section. So here we go. And then from the front view, there we go. So it's a very fast movement. As I mentioned, unlike the deadlift that takes 3 to 5 seconds per rep, the swing is about 1.5 seconds per rep. And as I mentioned, there's no rest point with a swing. If it doesn't feel right and something is out of alignment, you can't really adjust at the end of the concentric and eccentric and try again. You almost just have to try to correct the movement mid-movement, or put the bell down, reset, and retry, okay? Now with a light enough weight, I have seen people plenty of times start off in a set with a specific thing going on that was not in alignment, not what we were wanting to do, and then over the course of 10 to 12 reps, really correct that. So just because you're making a mistake, something's not out of alignment, doesn't necessarily mean put the kettlebell down. At this level, we should be using a weight that's so light that the likelihood of injury is very, very small, as long as we don't keep on repeating the same mistakes weeks on end, okay? So that's the two-hand kettlebell swing. Hip hinge to plank position. Exhale at the top. Inhale as you come down. Keep your head in alignment with your spine. Everything that we learned in the deadlift. Hip snap. Drive that bell using your hips out front and then out back, okay? Now let's get into most common mistakes. And again, this kind of, like I said, has a lot of carryover with the how-to. One of the cool things I think about talking about common mistakes with a kettlebell is that overwhelmingly I can correct one thing and all of these other little secondary problems self-correct because they were a result of the primary problem, okay? So one of the things I've mentioned to you is that one of the biggest differences between the deadlift and the swing is tempo, right? The swing is very, very fast. Deadlift is relatively slow. So for that reason, one of the biggest mistakes, and let's just say one of the biggest areas that people have to spend the most amount of time practicing to get it right, yeah, is timing. This exercise happens very quickly, and you got to get your timing right. If your timing is wrong, it leads to a cascade of other problems. Like I said, once you fix the timing, all of those other problems go away. So I'm going to kind of go deeply into this, because I think that once you get the timing right, you're going to realize that 90% of the problems you had in your swing get polished away. And then we'll talk about some of the other mistakes that may be not so related to timing, okay? So when it comes to timing, I'm not going to use a kettlebell because I'm going to show you this in slow motion. Let's just pretend I got a bell back here, I swing it back, I drive it out front, okay? Now this is overwhelmingly 90+ percentile, the mistake that people make at first, is that the bell starts to come down, and at some point in this arc, most importantly, it's premature, the practitioner will break in the hips, as you see the hip hinge, but it's premature. As a result, it ends up bringing the bell way too low. It ends up putting the practitioner in a bit of a squat pattern. It's kind of like a hybrid between a squat and a bend a lot of times. Sometimes it's a full-on squat, but usually it's sort of a hybrid. And what happens now on the way up is that the bell is traveling in more of an up and down trajectory than a back to front trajectory, and it's all due to the fact that the timing was off. Furthermore, when your timing is off, because of the nature of the power delivery and the path of the kettlebell, it also tends to create much higher prevalence of the problem that I mentioned earlier, which is this arching of the back. And so when the bell's coming up and down, a lot of times you kind of see that somebody's really like arching at the top. And then another common mistake is using too much or any upper body to try to front raise that kettlebell. So if you're not using your hips properly and you're kind of squatting with it, a lot of times at the end you're kind of trying to lift it using your arms and shoulders. You can usually tell when you or somebody is front raising the kettlebell instead of swinging it powered by their hips, because the kettlebell will dangle a little bit at the top. Okay, it doesn't shoot straight out. Perfect alignment with a kettlebell at the top of the swing is shoulder, fist, and then mass of the kettlebell. Okay, so the timing, what should it look like? Your timing is you bring that bell up, you want to wait until the very last minute to hinge back in the hips, okay? It's the premature timing that, like I said, leads to so many other problems. Just wait. And then when your arms are almost contacting your body, then you move backwards. If you start hinging here, you're not going to hinge back, and if you do, that makes the arc of that kettlebell huge. What happens is you end up hinging more into a squat pattern. Either way, it's not desirable, it's not efficient, and it's also not nearly as safe. When your timing is off and that arc is huge, much bigger arc than you want, it puts a lot more stress on your lower back. Okay, so make sure you get your timing right. How do we get the timing right? There's two, please understand this, what the cue that works for one person won't work for another person. So you might have to try a few different things to get your timing right. But there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. The first thing I would say is when you're first learning how to kettlebell swing, don't begin by trying to swing the bell off the ground and do 10 reps in your set the first time swinging. Start off doing this, okay? So you guys can play along with me here. Got the kettlebell out front, you're hinging down, you're grabbing the handle, safety check, swing it back, and then bring it back to the ground. Swing it back, and then bring it back to the ground. And each time you swing it back, you're looking for this position, which is as far back as you can be. You're trying not to swing it down and scrape it along the ground. You're trying to hike it back like a football up behind you to here, and then bring it to the ground. Do that 10, 15 times. If you still feel a little shaky with it, Do 2, 3, or 4 sets of that, of just hiking it back, bringing it back to the ground. It's just barely a little bit more complex than the deadlift that we left off with. Once you've got that, now we'll go one swing, bring it back, and set it down. So here we go, safety check, back swing, one swing, back and down. Let's do it again. Okay, and again. And again. And as you do this, assess your timing. Bell comes up, assess. Are you able to wait till the last minute to let that bell come all the way back and then put it down? If you're coming here and your timing is off, we're not ready to start chaining 10 swings together quite yet, okay? Work at it on this level, one swing at a time, and get that timing correct. That bell coming back, back, back. And you'll know when it's right because you're going to be here and the bell will be behind you. You're not going to be here with that bell kind of at a 45-degree downward, backwards angle or worse. If you try this technique and you still struggle, especially when you do start trying to chain swings together in sets of 10 or whatever set count you're doing, if you notice that when you start chaining them together that your timing suffers, then there's a couple of different things you can do. One thing is to take an object and place it in the dead position while you are swinging your kettlebell, okay? Now generally what I like to use here is an empty gallon container, empty gallon jug of plastic, not glass. Because if that bell comes back and hits it, it's just that. Or you know what else works well is like a soccer ball or a large beach ball. Now, for me, if this was a soccer ball, I would be able to get away with pretty bad technique because of how low that would actually still sit. So I might want something a little bit higher, but I also have really long legs. But if you just put something down here that if you hit it, it's not a catastrophe. Like I said, an empty plastic jug or a soccer ball. Have something down there that if you hit it, you're going to get that feedback that that kettlebell is going too low. And of course, you can also use a kettlebell. I only recommend doing this if you're highly confident that you're not going to hit it, because you can, if nothing else, chip the coating on your handle of your kettlebells. But just to have something below you, as that bell comes back, like, oh, I got to keep it up as high as possible. There's this little mental thing about it that's like, oh, keep it up. And I found that that is a wonderful solution to this timing issue and keeping the bell where it needs to be. So that would be the first thing that I would say works really well. And usually that's enough. Usually if I do that, that will trigger the movement to correct itself, and then from there we can cement that. There is another technique that works pretty well too, which is if you have somebody, a training partner or a coach that you trust, when you get to the top of the swing, to have them in a very fluid and natural manner push the kettlebell back down. You know, they're not trying to jerk it or yank it or anything like that, but as it floats, they're just trying to increase the natural gravity of that kettlebell in its arc. And what happens is that sort of increased eccentric tempo kind of moves that kettlebell faster than maybe you were ready, and it drops the kettlebell so quickly that it actually kind of corrects the timing automatically. And then once you get that sensation of like, oh, that's where I time it, then the coach can step away and you're on it. You've got it, okay? If you don't have somebody to help you do that, there's a way you can do it by yourself. And that is simply by going into the engagement through the lat at the top of the swing and pulling the bell back down. Okay, so if your timing is really a problem for you and you've tried all of the cues but still it's hard to be consistent, what I would say is this: when you get to the very top of your swing and that kettlebell is floating, pull it back down. Now you don't have to yank on it, and when you do pull it back down, the bell should not end up higher than your fist, right? You're not going to pull it down to where it's now the bell is inverted, okay? Everything stays in perfect alignment as you bring it back down, but you're just reversing course and encouraging it back downwards, which speeds up that eccentric tempo, and again, it will help to correct the timing. It looks like this, and we won't even really notice it. It's so subtle. But I'm pulling the bell back down. Do that with a weight that's very light, because you are, by speeding it up, you're increasing the felt experience of that weight. But as you can see, maybe I'm kind of just returning it back down with a little bit of force. But you'll also notice as I did that, the bell never popped up in the air. It stayed in a beautiful alignment, like that. So I feel that if you use all of these cues from the 1 rep start to then adding 1 rep swing, to putting something between your legs, to learning how to pull the bell back down gently, but also with a little bit of enthusiasm. If you learn those things and you practice it for a day or two, maybe 4 or 5 days, who knows, you're going to get this in no time. It's really not that difficult. Remember, when you are practicing something that requires a lot of technique, we're not really worried about intensity. We don't need to go super heavy. We don't need to drive up the volume extremely high. What we're more trying to focus on is consistency. I would say you're better off with 2 20-minute sessions than 1 40-minute session, and you'd be better off with 5 or 6 20-minute sessions over the week than turning that into 1 or 2 workouts and going really hardcore at it. Consistency, when you're learning technique, consistency is really a good way to do it. What we call greasing the groove. Never driving the intensity too high, never driving the volume too high, but just keep practicing. Okay, so that concludes mistakes. I think from here on out, you're going to get it. We already know you're not going to exhale, or you're not going to extend, I should say, at the top. You're going to keep your abs nice and tight. You're going to hip snap. You're going to drive the kettlebell with your hips. You're not going to front raise it. And you're going to get that timing right. It's a hip hinge. It's not a squat. Okay, those are the main things. And if you practice it, I think that you'll be able to iron out the mistakes from here. So what we'll do is we'll move into the next and final segment of this video, which is some progressions of the kettlebell swing. So the 2-hand kettlebell swing is really the first exercise that you're going to learn when you say, I'm moving from the strength phase into the power phase with a kettlebell, right? It's really one of the very first power phase exercises, because it is really probably the most basic. From here, we can make it more difficult. So how do we do that? Well, there's all sorts of things I can do with 2-handed swing. I mean, a lot of people like to throw it and kind of like flip it around and things like that. Like, you can let your imagination run wild, and really, there's not really a right and a wrong. I think a lot of people get very dogmatic about these things, and they're like, oh, that's not how you do it, and this is how you do it. And it's like, you don't know what this person's trying to accomplish or what motivates them to even move their body. So don't be dogmatic about it, but let's go into some variations. So 2-hand kettlebell swing, you start to get this dialed down, and then from the 2-handed swing, so begin your set in this 2-handed swing, and then just take 1 hand off and 1 hand swing. And keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, and then grab 2 hands back on that bell and 2 hand swing, and now take the other hand off and 1 hand swing. 1 hand swing, 1 hand swing. 2 hands, switch hands again. When you're ready, do as many 2-hand swings as you need. and then just switch to the other side. This is a really good way to learn the one-handed swing, because you start from a familiar pattern and you can transition straight back to that familiar pattern mid-movement if it doesn't feel right. What's the difference between a two and a one-hand swing? Well, if I stay in perfect alignment on the frontal plane with a two-handed swing, I'm going to be very balanced. Okay? If I do that with a one-hand swing, I won't be balanced because this kettlebell wants to pull me into rotation. And the reason it wants to do that is because the pendulum, the line that it's traveling on, is medial, whereas the anchor point is lateral. So in other words, I'd have to have this angle to my arm if I'm swinging with one hand. And that's not going to work because the kettlebell will actually want to just naturally start to swing to the side. So what you're going to find is when you start swinging with one hand, this will also apply to the clean and snatch as we progress, that you're going to have rotation. Okay? And that rotation is going to move that anchor point more centered on your body so that that pendulum stays centered and it's not wanting to swing outwards like this. Okay? So this is one of the beautiful things about unilateral, one-handed weightlifting, is that it takes us from working one plane of movement, like the two-hand swing is what we say sagittal plane movement. Now when we go into, that's bilateral, when we go into unilateral, now we have sagittal, we have frontal plane movement, and we also have transverse. So now we're working three planes of movement with the swing, whereas with the two-handed swing, we're really practicing one plane of movement. So understand that, because it's very important. One of the things that we're doing with the kettlebell is making it efficient. You make it efficient by keeping it in that line, as close to your plumb line as possible. So there's rotation. Okay? Biggest difference between that. When you learn how to one-hand swing, like I said, just do it the way I showed you. Two-hand swings, then take one hand off and give it a few swings. Then put the hand back on, go to two hands again, and take the other one off. Do a few swings. Eventually, you're going to be coming off the ground with one hand, and you're going to be able to swing. And then you can use this. This is one of the main reasons I use the swing, to be honest with you, as a method of transportation to go from right hand to left hand. So I'm doing a sequence over here. I want to switch to the other side. I'm just going to drop it back, swing it up, one hand, switch hands at the top, swing it back, and wash, rinse, and repeat on the other side. So that switch could be just two hands meeting on the handle at the same time. Super easy. As you start to kind of get a little bit more practiced, you're going to see it's even easier if you let go and then just kind of grab right on with the other hand. That's actually even easier than the two-handed switch. But all of those things take time to practice and build up confidence. Okay, so from here, now we can go into the alternating swing, where you're just switching with every hand, with every rep, and you're rotating from side to side. And there you go. So you've learned a two-hand swing. You've learned the one-handed swing. You've learned how to do the swing switch, and then an alternating swing, which is also beautiful. These are all great progressions of this exercise that, to be honest with you, from the beginning to the end, that could be a couple of months before you get to that point. Very, very reasonably. For most people, that would be a couple of months. If you're just now learning the two-hand swing, it'll be a couple of months before you're so confident and competent that you're swing switching at least. So take your time and go through this path at your own pace. Hopefully this video really helps you guys. I put a lot of time into making sure I cover everything, but I don't talk for too long, and I know I do have a tendency to get into a lot of details, but I feel that they are details, or you're gonna ask whether it's now in the first video or it's gonna be in a week from now or 2 weeks from now when you've practiced this stuff and it's good, but you're still not quite right with it. And if you watch this whole video, I think that we solve all of those problems in one go. So these details, I think, matter. Practice, 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 and I'll see you in the next video. If you guys appreciate the content that I provide for you, I would greatly appreciate if you would hit that like button, drop a little comment below, let me know how you're getting along with your training, and also subscribe to the channel. It means so much to me that I have your support to keep on creating all this content. Thank you guys.